you know we were talking about honour this morning. We've been looking at this, I don't even know, is it 3 months? Where are we? April. And so I want to finish this series today. Oh, you meant to go, oh, that's really sad. We've loved it so much. We've not remotely been challenged. But as we do that today, we are about to launch in the next few weeks on our scriptures series, which is going to really challenge you on what you think you know about the scriptures. But our ultimate goal, as should any Sunday morning, it's about equipping you in the book of books and what to do with it, how to read it, how to engage with it, how to hear God in it. And I'll be honest, we're going to talk about all the weird stuff and all the crazy stuff. We're going to look at inerrancy and contradictions and those genealogies and those lists and the context and the purpose and the kingdom. And I've made it sound really unexciting, but I can assure you that we're going to take this book that you go sometimes, just do my reading, and we're going to make it come alive for you. But we're going to address all the questions that you actually have about it that you've gone, I don't get this. Like, I'm sure they've borrowed that from somewhere. We're going to go into all that stuff. So I know fully well that you are going to be superbly equipped, more than probably you ever have before. With all humility, we're working really hard on that series. So today, I want to close this series on honor by just kind of encapsulating the very heart of it. You see, so far we've seen so many things about this honor. We've seen that ultimately we live in a Western world full of shame, full of dishonor, where we love to build people up so we can pull them down. I used examples like David Beckham. I mean, he's this hero. He has like half a second of stupidity where he kicks out and should never have got sent off. And then we're literally making dartboards of him the next day about football. It's ridiculous. Tiger Woods, we loved him and we built him up as this incredible sportsman. And then he completely ruins his life for a season. And we loved it, didn't we? I think one of the newspapers said the DUI Tiger. You know, it's just like, oh, come on, we can do better. So because we live in such a culture like that, as followers of Jesus, we have the greatest opportunity we can imagine. Because in a culture of shame and dishonor, when you bring honor, everyone notices. You can't not notice, particularly in times of adversity, you can't not notice when someone completely changes the attitude and the environment and the culture of the meeting you're in. So if someone's dishonoring someone and you say, well, actually, I quite like them. I think they're this. I think I see something and then there might be a point here. And you're kind of bringing a different spirit. You're shutting down the negativity. I mean, in my life, I made a decision. I'm a fairly naturally cynical person. I put it down to just being British, actually. It's just a trait that we all have. Quite a sarcastic person. But I've worked really hard at honor. I am far from perfect on this. But I have noticed that when someone is being gossipy or just dishonorable in general, that you change the complete environment when you bring the opposite spirit. So we have this phenomenal opportunity, but I would argue the church is not taking it. That we're as bad as anybody else, if not worse, at it. We're probably the only organization on the planet that shoots our wounded, for goodness sake. Honor is all in the life of Jesus, and yet maybe not really in the life of the church. I think that's a fair statement. Feel free to agree to disagree, etc., etc. So, but what I want to do today is I want to look at this, the fully fledged aspect of honor. Like when God is completely allowed to display honor through his people to the level that he wants to, what does that actually look like? But to do that, I want to do the opposite. So I want to spend some time looking at actually not just at dishonor in terms of when people are insecure or when people have got trauma and they just don't like it, when someone else is successful and we want to pull them down to make ourselves feel better. No, I want to look at, and it's a little bit harrowing, and I don't think it'll trigger you, but I put that warning out there. If you want to take a moment at some point, feel free to. I want to look at what happens when dishonor is allowed to be fully demonic. Like, what is the extreme version of dishonor? Because I am genuinely concerned in the world today, when I read the scriptures and I look at the news, which I try and look at less and less and less, that we are heading down some dangerous, weird paths. And I'm not convinced the church is actually on the right side of this half the time. And so I think, personally, when I've looked at this, when I've prayed this through and I look at the scriptures and I look at the world, I think the ultimate demonic goal of dishonor isn't simply discrediting someone. It isn't simply trying to get rid of their influence so you can have influence. I think the very essence, the demonic, when it grips a hold of dishonor in our lives and in the world, the ultimate goal is dehumanization. I don't even know if that's a real word, but it's the right word. Our greatest example of this, in its most purest evil form, is the Nazis. So I want to look at that for a second. You see, it was a calculated demonic assault against various people groups. And the goal of that ultimately, and I think we'll all agree that that's probably one of the greatest examples of demonic manifestation we've got in modern-ish times. The goal was dehumanization. So through the education system of the Nazis, through the propaganda of the Nazis, we see that actually they created the perfect storm of dishonor doing two things. The first one I've noted, and I love my history, is they established a self-sense of superiority, an elite mentality. They created a concept called a Volksgemeinschaft. Essentially, it's German for people's community. And they included certain people in that. Mainly, those who were included were those who were considered pure ethnic Germans. Included hardworking farmers, laborers, soldiers. For the female of the species, it meant that you were a great homemaker and you had children. But it also excluded several people groups. We have here the Jews, considered racial enemies, constantly blamed for Germany's problems, predominantly economic, but not just that. Then we have the Slavs and the Romani people. Anybody really who didn't fit their criteria of superiority of that was labeled subhuman. Then we see, and this is where it just even more so becomes quite harrowing. Here we have the fact that actually it excluded disabled people, seen as a burden, targeted actually for forced sterilization and euthanasia. Then we have the LGBTQ plus individuals and the political opponents, people that were persecuted for their ideologies, persecuted because of this alleged traditional family value threat. Communists, socialists, trade unionists, anybody that weren't aligning with Nazi ideology was excluded. They were encapsulated as this idea of, well, you're not part of us. We're superior to you. You're down here. You're less than us because you don't meet our criteria. Essentially, for the demonic, dishonoring others by making yourself kind of superior actually isn't enough. It's the first aspect of the framework. The second aspect of this that I saw is not just superiority, but once you establish some form of elitism, you come to the conclusion that you need to establish separation. So in 1935, we find something called the Nuremberg Laws. It's this legal separation from any group that wasn't considered part of this Aryan ideal race. So they excluded Jews from being German citizens. That's a warning sign straight away, isn't it? They banned marriage between Jews and anybody that wasn't a German citizen. Then we had social separation. Jews and other targeted groups we've mentioned were banned from public spaces. You're talking parks, you're talking schools, you're talking various professions. across the country. Then there came economic separation. So any non-Aryan businesses were either confiscated or they were literally handed over to German citizens who were included. And then you come to the deeply demonic one, the one that should really make us think. And it was physical separation. So they started, and I mean, it's so calculated when you look at this. They started by creating ghettos, areas where they would send the excluded to kind of be together, separate from everybody else. Fascinating. So Roma people, political prisoners, they're detained. We look at the media at the time, we look at films at the time, and something fascinating happens. Jews in particular are considered and displayed as parasites and rats, spreading disease, feeding off society. In school and science, you were taught that actually, and it's all false and it's all nonsense, but they would lie and they would take measurements of skulls and noses of Jewish people and show how they were inferior to them, the ideal Aryan race. Biological traits. And so years of this, and we are talking years of this, upwards of a decade of this being implanted through propaganda, through educational matters. The Jews and other people groups were no longer considered human, they were considered pests. They were likened to animals. And I want to ask you this question, that when they're not considered human anymore and someone's considered animals, what does that mean? How does that mean we treat them? We suddenly think, well, they're not really like us, they're not really human, we can do whatever we like. We're not going to include them, we're going to separate ourselves from them, we're superior to them. Which means we either get rid of them or they serve us, right? So they sent Jews and many other groups to things like concentration camps. They've written here, the Nazis didn't just elevate their ideal citizen, they forcibly removed anyone who didn't belong. Their dishonor dehumanized these groups of people so that they could do whatever they wanted to them and not feel guilty because it was so established. It's legitimate madness. It led to 6 million people being murdered. 6 million, like we hear that, don't we? Just stop for a second. 6 million people. Because of an ideology, because of dehumanization. 6 million people. Look at one. Look at around here. We probably barely got maybe 70 people. 6 million. Just because they didn't fit a narrative. You glad you came? And so, this is what dishonor always does. It's always heading somewhere, some kind of superiority, some kind of separation somewhere. And so I want to take you to a surprising place now. I want to take you to a place where this stuff is happening. It may not be genocide. Maybe we don't have genocide in the West that we're aware of to any degree of that kind of level that we know about at this time of history. But something I saw in somewhere surprising about dishonor, about separation and superiority, it got me a little bit concerned. So we find this very clear racist and dishonoring kind of prejudice, and it's in the New Testament, not even in the Old Testament. I'm talking the New Testament, and it's coming from a particular place. It's coming from the Jews, and it's coming from the very first followers of Jesus. This exact traits that we've just seen. And so I want to expand this a little bit and explore this with you. So the first thing we see is, again, superiority. It's interesting. You see, the Jews had this identity in God, and in some ways it's healthy, in other ways it's not. But they felt like, well, we're God's chosen people. Israel is the nation, right? And so, but they'd missed the point. The point was, sure, it starts as a responsibility thing. I think they initially kind of got it, but somehow it morphed into this superiority complex that we're better than everybody else. I just want to read a text, and it's Isaiah 42:6. It says, I, the Lord, have called you in righteousness. His righteousness, not theirs, by the way. I will take hold of your hand. Don't do it in your own strength. I will keep you, not you, doing it yourself. I will make you, not that you'll make yourself, to be a covenant for the people and a light for the Gentiles. Does it go on and say, so you can lord it over them? No. So the whole point and the purpose of God taking a nation out of the other nations and establishing this brand new nation away from the sons of God that we've looked at several times, away from the other gods who are overseeing the nations and principalities, God establishes his own people, not so they could lord it over other people, not so that they could think, oh, we're superior and we're God's chosen and no one else matters, but so they could say, you know what, God loves you, you're in. Come. This is who God is. This is what he's about. He's inclusive, he's loving, he's gracious. The orphans, the widows, the slaves, you're all included where you've been excluded. But they didn't quite get it. Because we look at the time of Jesus and we see so many things in Scripture that you've read that should begin to worry you a little bit here. So they commonly referred to Gentiles as dogs. Now, some of us have dogs. Most of the time I like mine. But if I was to call you a dog, it's not a compliment. Maybe you've come up with another term. Just keep that to yourself. But there's this idea here that they are dehumanizing through superiority. They even genuinely hated the Samaritans. They essentially, in their own language, called them half-breed heretics. Isn't that extraordinary? This is God's people, the light to the nations. And yet they are having this sense of superiority. And this superiority, it leads to the second issue that we've already seen. It leads to separation. You see, in order to keep the law, because they still hadn't got it, they still hadn't got this was relational. To stay pure, to stay loyal to the one true God, Jews created a law on top of the law of their own interpretation to not mix with Gentiles, to not mix with anybody that was like them. It's bizarre. I want to read some unusual texts for you, written a little bit after the time of Jesus, but oral tradition passed down through around the time of Jesus and well before. This helps us understand the mentality of a lot of the religious people at the time. So we're going to read from the Tosefta Avodah Zarah. That's harder to say than you think. 2 verses 6, 7, and 2:6. A Jew may not drink their wine nor partake of their bread, for these are things that lead to close association. Close association to who? To anybody not like them. One may not enter into a partnership with a Gentile, nor raise animals together with them, nor entrust an animal to them. In other words, won't even let them look after our pets, nor place it in their inns, nor entrust them with a child, for they are suspected of bloodshed. Bit extreme, isn't it? Wow. Okay then, issues. See, these issues that we see here, they're all traditions, and it meant that Jews would sit at different tables to outsiders. It also meant they'd ban non-Jews from the inner workings of the temple, so they didn't have access to worship God like everybody else. These supposed folks of God constantly reinforced their own elitism and established a sense of not just superiority over them, but separation from them by removing their dignity, by dishonoring them, by essentially, and you can see the parallel here, by dehumanizing them. We look deeper into history and culture and the text, and we see numerous things. They despised the Romans and their associates. They saw them as morally corrupt. They excluded the Gentiles, the sick and disabled. They saw anybody who was not like them as sinners. They called them unclean. They were to be separated from them. And so it's really important that you know that God never told them to do any of that. Their interpretation of the scriptures, their misunderstanding, this misrepresentation of the scriptures meant that they'd done all this stuff and they'd got it wrong. They'd added layers upon layers onto the scriptures. And what I love about Jesus is that we see him time and time again, where the Pharisees in particular are prioritizing protocols and policies over people. We'll come back to that. And Jesus addresses them and completely obliterates them. I just want to read one passage. It's one of my favorites. I don't know if I'm allowed to have favorites, but this is one of them. It's Mark 7, 5-9. So the Pharisees and teachers of the law asked Jesus, "Why don't your disciples live according to the tradition of the elders instead of eating their food with defiled hands?" He replied, "Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites. As it is written, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules. You have let go of the commands of God and are holding on to human traditions." And he continued, "You have a fine way of setting aside the commandments of God in order to observe your own traditions." He's basically saying you are missing the point. There's this long passage. I think it's the Sermon on the Mount. And he basically comes and Jesus is trying to get them to understand something. And he says several times, dozens and dozens times, he says, "You have heard that it was said, but I tell you." And so he takes what they think to be true and he goes, "You got it wrong. It actually meant this. Oh, by the way, you've done it again. You thought it meant this, but it actually means this. You've heard that it was said, but I tell you, it means this." And he does it again and again and again because he's trying to establish truth. And so for me, the ultimate goal of honor when we look at this and everything that we've looked at to this point and we close with today is everything that Jesus fought so hard for, that he continued to try and get. It's ultimately, I suppose, in many ways what the kingdom is all about. And it's not dehumanization. You probably guessed it's rehumanization. Everything that Jesus does, every interaction that he has, it's a relational context. He's trying to build people back up. He's renewing, he's redeeming, he's restoring people all the time. And so I don't know where you are on this paradigm. I'm sure many of you are kind of nodding in silent agreement, waiting for me to finish. But I need you to get this, so I'm going to labor for a little bit longer on this point. And I want to read several scriptures to get this home. Is that all right? 7 of you. That's good. We started with 1. John 8. Religious leaders bring a woman caught in adultery. He defends her. He says, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone." Kneels down next to her, writes all their names one by one. That's why they leave one by one. He writes their names down in the sand, saying, "By the way, you're not part of this. You're excluded just like she is." They go one at a time. Fascinating. And then secondly, he tells her, they've all gone, he says, "Have they condemned you? Neither do I. Go and live your life now with me." That's what that means. Go and sin no more. Live your life for me now. I have a better way for you to live. So he restores her. He rehumanizes her. See, the Pharisees brought her because they're bothered about protocol. They're bothered about policies. They're bothered about someone's not living right. Well, join the club. None of us are, by the way. Did you know that? I don't know if you know. If that's a shock to you, come and see me afterwards. If you think you're perfect, let me give you a prophetic word later. Where the religious leaders prioritize protocols, Jesus prioritizes people. His people all the time. Mark 1, we see an example of lepers being rejected by society, by actually the religious leaders and communities who were meant to look after them, by the way, historically. But Jesus rehumanizes him. He touches them. You're not meant to do that. By the way, unless you're a priest. It's kind of your job. Interesting. And he restores him. He rehumanizes him. Not just physically does he restore him. He restores him socially. No superiority complex with Jesus. He's in the dirt with each one of them. Luke 19, Zacchaeus, this despised tax collector no one likes because, he's cheating the books. He's stealing their money. So you can understand they're a bit miffed. But Jesus calls him out. He rehumanizes him. He brings him. He addresses him. He eats with him. And then he says, you know what? Here's how to be reformed. And the guy is reformed, changed, transformed. Is this getting across? You understanding Jesus again and again? Okay, let's carry on just in case. Mark 5, a demon-possessed man has been abandoned by society. He's left in chains. He's in a tomb area. He's on his own. He has no hope, no community, nothing. Okay, you could argue he's dangerous because of the demonic, but there's no one around to help him. And yet Jesus goes to him. Not only does he deliver him, not only does he clothe him, he commissions him to tell his story. He goes from this dehumanized, demonic individual to being fully rehumanized and a missionary to the Gentile people. That's essentially what happens. Remarkable what Jesus does with people. Then we come to the temple and we have the Gentile court. And the Gentile court is the area that has been established where anybody non-Jewish can kind of come and they can kind of have their little time with God, except they can't. Because the Jews have established a marketplace. They've seen an opportunity, a business opportunity. And so they've loaded it with market stalls where they can buy sacrifices to give so that they can be closer to God. Spot the problem. And Jesus, what does he do? Excuse me, sorry, can I address you all? There's a problem here. I think you've missed the point. I think he probably started a bit like that. And then he thinks this ain't working. So he sits there and he kind of weaves something over a period of time. It takes a while to make a whip. He doesn't strike anybody, but he's going to make a flipping point. And so he drives them out and he says, this space is for Gentiles, so you say, so let it be so. No one's excluded. They get to worship just like you. Get out. He's including, what is he doing ultimately? He's rehumanizing a rejected society. He's including people that are broken and the rejected of society. I love this. I hope you're getting it, just in case you aren't. Mark 10. The disciples rebuke. This is nuts for our world, but you've got to understand something. Children are the bottom rung of society. They have no legal rights. They're a pain. They're annoying. Okay, that's not me talking about my children. I love my children. I'm talking contextually. Okay, at the time of Jesus, just to clarify, in case they watch this back one day. Okay, not that they will. I don't know why I did that. Father issues, and yet, so they're here, and the children are just they're doing children things, right? I don't know if you know this, but children get in the way. They run around. They play with leads. Not that I've had them, and they just do stuff. Okay, and so the disciples are like, can you control your children? They shouldn't be anywhere near this great man. And Jesus is like, oh, you idiots. He's probably like, yo, disciples, you silly sausage. And he's there in this moment. He says, let them come to me, for goodness sake. And he then essentially says, this bottom rung of society, the whole point of the kingdom is them. So he's not just making a statement about kids, by the way. He's saying those that are right at the bottom, the ones that you don't think much of, the ones that have no legal rights, I've come to establish a kingdom for them. Amazing stuff. I don't know if you're getting it, so just a couple more. Luke 7. Luke 7's amazing. I love Luke 7. It's weird, but it's wonderful. And there's one thing at the end of this, and a prostitute comes. Ooh, awkward. And it comes to Jesus. She's there, and then you can imagine, I can't remember who it is it Simon? And they're having dinner, and this lady walks in, and everyone knows what she is. Awkward. And she's just all over Jesus. Right, can I just be honest? If that happened to me here on a Sunday, I'd find it a little bit awkward and I'd probably want some help. But here's Jesus and he's amazing and incredible. And so what she does is she ends up this incredible woman who is again completely excluded, completely ostracized. Bear in mind, she doesn't have a seat. So she turns up and she pours a year's worth of her own salary all over him. And they don't like this. If he knew who this woman was and what she did, he wouldn't. If he was a prophet, like everyone thinks he is, he wouldn't let her near him. It's outrageous. But Jesus says, your sins are forgiven. Your sins are given. Your faith has saved you. Go in peace. What's he done? He's taken this woman that everyone's rejecting and he's rehumanized her and he's given her purpose and he's reforming her and he's including her, and all of a sudden her world changes. And the religious elite there who are at their separate tables, who think they're superior and have separated everyone else, are like, this is really difficult to take. Every person, every race, every class, every sinful person that we feel superior to, every person that we separate from ourselves, every person we think aren't enough or whom we exclude, Jesus is always rehumanizing. Always. And so I have to ask us the question on this Sunday. And I want you to take this really seriously, because I have the last couple of years. Who are you labeling? Where are you in your life feeling superior? Where in your life are you actually separating from people or a group of people or a type of people? Where are you in your life? Where is the church feeling superior? Where is the church separating? Where are we seeing issues and not individuals? One of my biggest gripes right now when I look biblically at Jesus is we bung people together. We judge people because they sin differently to us. Who are we discriminating against? So I want to ask you a few questions, and I want you to take away these. We'll put them on our social media and you can process them, you can think on them. Please don't ignore them. Because I'll tell you this, Jesus does have a problem, and he's not afraid to flip tables and make whips. He's not going to hurt you, he loves you, but he will challenge you where we're not on the right page of honor. Where are you in church separating? Where are you in church being superior? Where are you individually, and where is church as a whole dehumanizing where God is rehumanizing? We have to ask those questions if we are to reach a hurting and broken world. The problem is we're not even asking the flipping question. Not really. As I was praying about this, I felt the Father give me a picture, and you've got to be careful, haven't you, with when you share pictures, but I get some things right sometimes, mainly wrong, but sometimes right. So I'll leave this one for your discernment. I saw Christians having a party, but it was a self-righteous party. And I was looking around, and do you know what? At times it looked quite fun, a bit weird, but it was fun, and it's something you'd want to be a part of. It was quite entertaining. There was lots of food. Everyone's like having a fairly good time. Ultimately, I'll get used to this at some point. But Jesus wasn't there. I mean, that's not biblical. Jesus is everywhere, right? He's with us here, and he's with us everywhere. But actually, in this vision, there was a group of people hanging out outside, and Jesus was with them. And I went, oh, whoops. And I'm not trying to judge everyone else. I'm just trying to look at my own heart. Where have I done that? I keep joking. It looks like a middle-class picnic in here most weeks. You know, that's not what church is meant to look like, and I believe God is changing that. And if we want revival, if we want to move of God, if we want to transform local society, not just impact the church globally, and there are two things that we're focused on at the moment, it starts with honor. It's the rehumanization of everyone, no matter what. So I ask you this, please, 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 please. When Jesus was asked, what are the greatest commandments? What's the purpose of all this? He said two things. And you know them. The church knows them. It's hard to ignore them. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart. And love your neighbor as yourself. Don't know about you, but you don't get to decide who your neighbor is. Sometimes I like my neighbors. And I'm being recorded, so I won't put the other part on. If we want to see revival, I need to say this. Sort your prejudices out. Don't ignore them. Don't pretend they're not there. You've all got them. We've all got them. We've got to deal with them. I was amazed when I asked God what mine were, and I was shocked. Genuinely didn't know I was that messed up. And you know what? If your theology doesn't fit with the narrative of loving him and loving others, it's wrong. So ask yourself the question, why am I putting this book in front of what I know to be true and what Jesus did and said? Why am I taking interpretations that I've heard of that don't seem to align with that statement? Because there's no love and then a but that follows that conversation. It's either love and all in or nothing. Ultimately, we have to ask ourselves these questions. So where do you need to? And I'm telling you this, and the scripture series is going to be gold for this. And if there's some religion in you and there's some religious spirits in all of us, it's going to be quite interesting for you. I'm so excited. What we're going to do is we're getting a grenade, spiritual one, we're dropping it in the congregation, and then we're going to go like this and just watch it cause beautiful, holy chaos. Is that the phrase in the book? What was that beautiful phrase you have of the book you're reading, Julie? Holy anarchy. What a great phrase. I hope you're prepared. So this series, adjust your theology if it doesn't mean loving people, because friends, family, that's where we're going.